was time for the execution of Arlen Bitterbuck. In reality, no chief, but the first elder of his tribe in the Washita Reservation, and a member of the Cherokee Council as well. He had killed a man while drunk, while both of them were in drunken fact. The chief had crushed the man's head with a cement block. The issue had been a pair of boots. So on July 17th of that rainy summer, my council of elders intended for his life to end. Visiting hours for most cold mountain prisoners were as rigid as steel beams, but that didn't hold back for our boys on E-Block. So on the 16th, Bitterbuck was allowed to go over to the long room adjacent to the cafeteria, the arcade. It was divided straight down the middle by mesh interwoven with strands of barbed wire. Here the chief would visit his second wife, and those of his children who would still treat with him. It was time for the goodbyes. He was taken over there by Bill Dodge and 2 other floaters. The rest of us had work to do. One hour to cram in at least 2 rehearsals, 3 if we could manage it. Percy didn't make much protest over being put in a switch room with Jack Van Hay for the Bitterbuck electrocution. He was too green to know if he had been given a good spot or a bad one. What he did know was that he had a rectangular mesh window to look through, and although he probably didn't care to be looking at the back of the chair instead of the front, he would still be close enough to see the sparks flying. Right outside the window was a black wall telephone with no crank or dial on it. The phone would only ring in, and only from one place, the governor's office. I've seen lots of jailhouse movies over the years where the official phone rings just as they're getting ready to pull the switch on some poor innocent sap, but ours never rang during all the years on E-Block. Never once. In the movies, salvation is cheap. So is innocence. You pay a quarter, and a quarter's worth is what you get. Real life costs more, and most of the answers are different. We had a tailor's dummy down in the tunnel for the run to the meat wagon, and we had old Toot Toot for the rest. Over the years, Toot had somehow become the traditional stand-in for the condemned, as time-honored in his way as the goose you sit down on Christmas, whether you like goose or not. Most of the other screws liked him, were amused by his funny accent, also French, but Canadian rather than Cajun, and softened it into its own thing by his years of incarceration in the South. Even Brutal got a kick out of old Toot. Not me, though. I thought he was, in his way, an older and dimmer version of Percy Wetmore, a man too squeamish to kill and cook his own meat, but who did all the same love the smell of a barbecue. We were all there for the rehearsal, just as we would have been there for the main event. Brutus Howell had been put out, as we said, which meant that he would place the cap, monitor the governor's phone line, summon the doctor from his place by the wall if he was needed, and give the actual order to roll on 2 when the time came. If it went well, there would be no credit for anyone. If it didn't go well, Brutal would be blamed by the witnesses, and I would be blamed by the warden. Neither of us complained about this. It wouldn't have done any good. The world turns, that's all. You can hold on and turn with it, or stand up to protest and be spun right off. Dean, Harry Twirliger, and I walked down the chief's cell for the first rehearsal not 3 minutes after Bill and his troops escorted Bitterbuck off the block and over to the arcade. The cell door was open, and old Toot Toot sat on the chief's bunk, his wispy white hair flying. "Here come stains all over this sheet," Toot Toot remarked. "He must have been trying to get rid of it before you fellas boil it off." And he cackled. "Shut up, Toot," Dean said. "Let's play this serious." "Okay," Toot Toot said, immediately composing his face into an expression of the thunderous gravity. But his eyes twinkled. Old Toot never looked so alive as he was plain dead. I stepped forward. "Arlen Bitterbuck, as an officer of the court and of the state of blah blah, I have a warrant for blah blah, sex execution to be carried out at 12:01 on blah blah. Will you step forward?" Toot got And Dean's checkup then would be make sure he didn't need a touch-up. Stubble can impede conduction, make things harder. Everything we doing today was about making things easier. Alright, Arlen, let's go. I said a toot-toot, and away we went. I'm walking down the corridor. I'm walking down the corridor. I'm walking down the corridor, Toot said. I flanked him on the left, Dean on the right. Harry was directly behind him. At the head of the corridor, we turned right, away from the life as it was lived in the exercise yard, and towards the death it was died in the storage room. We went into my office, and Toot dropped to his knees without having to be asked. He knew the script all right, probably better than any of us. God knew he'd been there longer than any of us. I'm praying, Toot Toot said, holding his gnarled hands up. They look like that famous engraving, you know, the one, the Lord is my shepherd, so on and so forth. Who's bitter about God? Harry asked. We're not going to have some Cherokee medicine man in here shaking his dick, are we? Actually, still praying, still getting right with Jesus. Toot overrode me. Shut up, you old gink, Dean said. I'm praying, then pray to yourself. What's keeping you guys? Brutal hauled in from the storage room. That had been emptied for our use. We were in the killing zone again, all right. It was one thing you could almost smell. Hold your friggin' water, Harry rolled back. Don't be so goddamn impatient. Praying, Toot said, grinning his unpleasant sunken grin. Praying for patience. Just a little goddamn patience. Actually, Bitterbuck's a Christian, he said. I told them. He's perfectly happy with the Baptist guy who came for Tillman Clark. Schulstern, his name is. I like him too. He's fast. He doesn't get them all worked up. On your feet, Toot. You prayed enough for one day. Walking, Toot said. Walking again. Walking again, yes, sir. Walking on the Green Mile. Short as he was, he still had to duck to get a little through the door on the far side of the office. The rest of us had to duck even more. This was a vulnerable time with a real prisoner, and when I looked across the platform where old Sparky stood and saw Brutal with his gun drawn, I nodded with satisfaction. Just right. Toot Toot went down the steps and stopped. The folding wooden chairs, about 40 of them, were already in place. Bitterbuck would cross the platform on an angle that would keep him safely away from the seated spectators, and a half-dozen guards would be added for insurance. Bill Dodge would be in charge of those. We never had a witness menaced by a condemned prisoner in spite of what it was, admittedly a raw setup, and that was how I meant to keep it. Ready, boys? Toot asked when we were back in the original formation at the foot of the stairs leading down from my office. I nodded, and we walked to the platform. What we looked like more than anything I often thought was the color guard that had forgotten its flag. What am I supposed to do? Percy called from behind the wire mesh of the storage room and the switch room. Watch and learn, I called back. And keep your hands off your wiener, Harry muttered. Toot Toot heard him, though, and cackled. We escorted him up onto the platform, and Toot turned around on his own, an old vet in action. Sitting down, he said, sitting down, taking a seat in old Sparky's lap. I dropped to my right knee before his right leg. Dean dropped to his left knee before his left leg. It was at this point we were almost vulnerable to physical attack should the condemned man go berserk, which every now and then they did. We both turned cock knees slightly inward to protect the crotch area. We dropped our chins to protect our throats. And of course, we moved to secure the ankles and neutralize the danger as fast as we could. The chief would be wearing slippers when he took the final promenade. But it could have been worse. Isn't much comfort to a man with a ruptured larynx. Or writhing on the floor with his balls swelling up to the size of mason jars for that matter, while 40 or so spectators, many of them gentlemen of the press, sit in those Grange Hall chairs watching the whole thing. We clamped Toot Toot's ankles. The clamp on Dean's side was slightly bigger because it carried the juice. When Bitterbuck sat down tomorrow night, he would have to do so with a like a coyote, and one hand clapped to his brow as if his brains were in there where they belonged, as if to keep his brains in there where they belonged. Harry was knocking his own head against the wall and going ha ha ha, as if a glob of food stuck in his throat. Even Jack Van Hay, a man not known for his sense of humor, was laughing. Felt like it myself, of course I did, but controlled it somehow. Tomorrow night it was going to be for real. A man would die in here where Toot Toot was sitting. Shut up, Brutal, I said. You too, Dean, Harry, and Toot. The next remark like that to come out of your mouth will be your last. I'll have Van Ray roll on too for real. Toot gave me a grin as if to say it was a good un. Boss Edgecombe, a real good un. I faltered into a narrow, puzzled wick. When he saw I wasn't answering it, "What's wrong with you?" he asked. "It's not funny," I asked. "That's what's wrong with me. And if you're not smart enough to get it, you better keep your gob shut." Except it was funny in its way, and I suppose that's what really made me mad. I looked around, saw Brutal staring at me, still grinning a little. "Shit," I said. "I'm getting too old for this job." "Nah," Brutal said. "You're in your prime, Paul." But I wasn't. Neither was he. Not as far as this goddamn job went, and we both knew it. Still, the important thing was that the laughing fit had passed. That was good, because the last thing I wanted someone to remember was Toot's smart aleck remark tomorrow night and getting going again. He'd say such a thing would be impossible. A guard laughing his ass off as he escorted a condemned men past witnesses to an electric chair. But when men are under stress, anything can happen. And a thing like that, people would have talked about it for 20 years. "Are you going to be quiet, Toot?" I asked. "Yes," he said. He averted his face so that the world's oldest, poutiest child. I nodded to Brutal that he should get on with the rehearsal. He took the mask from the brass hook down in the back of the chair and rolled it over Toot Toot's head, pulling it snug under his chin, which opened the hole at the top of to its widest diameter. Then Brutal leaned over, picked the wet circle of sponge out of the bucket, pressed one finger up against it, and licked the tip of the finger. That done, he put the sponge back in the bucket. Tomorrow he wouldn't. Tomorrow he would tuck it into the cap perched on the back of the chair. Not today, though. There was no need to get Toot's old head wet. The cap was steel, with the straps dangling down on either side. It sort of looked like a doughboy's helmet. Brutal put it on old Toot Toot's head, snugging over the hole in the back, head covering. "Get in the cap, get in the cap, get in the cap," Toot said. And now his voice sounded squeezed as well as muffled. The straps held his jaw almost closed, and I suspect Brutal had snugged it down a little tighter than he strictly had to for purposes of rehearsal. He stepped back, faced the empty seats, and said, "Arlen Bitterbuck, electricity shall now be passed through your body until you are dead, in accordance with state law. May God have mercy on your soul." Brutal turned to the mesh-covered rectangle. "Roll on 2. Old Toot, perhaps trying to recapture his earlier flair for comic genius, began to buck and flail in the chair as old Sparky's actual customers never did. "Now I'm frying," he cried. "Frying. Gee-ah, I'm a done Tom Turkey." Harry and Dean, I saw, were not watching this at all. They had turned away from Sparky and were looking across the empty storage room at the door leading back to my office. "Well, I'll be goddamned," Harry said. "One of the witnesses came a day early." Sitting in the door with his tail neatly curled around its paws, watching with his beady black oil spot eyes, was the mouse.